I have to say, uh, for starters, my name is Max, and welcome to Sonic Dorms. On today's show, I have a very, very, very special guest. I'm humbled to have him on. He's an award-winning producer, engineer, mixer, and songwriter. His name is David Z, the one and only. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you.
It really is an honor. I've been listening to a lot of the records you worked on since early childhood music listening memories, everything from the Family record, Jill Jones, Purple Rain. I mean, a lot of great records you worked on. It really is a pleasure, sir.
Cool.
Yeah. So for starters, you are an architect or one of the architects of what I would consider to be the Minneapolis Sound that goes back to the early 80s. Just I like to get down to the root of where these things come from, the origin stories, if you will. So, what was it that what were your earliest roots? Basically, is what I'm trying to ask you.
What were my earliest what?
Roots.
Oh, my earliest roots. Well, I started in a band in high school, and we mainly did like R&B, um, anything from stacked volt R&B to every kind of rhythm and blues group. And when the English decided to turn around on us, and the Stones started doing R&B, I mean that was kind of my impetus back then was rhythm and blues, and I love that kind of music.
Wonderful. And so from going to from that, where does this almost like electronic sort of element begin to tap into your sound? Is that something that just happened because of the technology that began to come onto the scene?
Well, it was partly due to technology because drum machines were coming into vogue, and that was kind of the big difference that we used drum machines and different ways to program drums rather than just sitting down at a trap set. And besides, I mean, I like to think of myself as a frustrated drummer, and I can create those things on a machine where I can't. It's very hard to coordinate your body. And my brother's a drummer, and I know I could never do that. Not physically behind a set. It's not the same thing. But
What what was it? Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. What were you saying? I'm sorry about that.
okay, I was just saying it's mathematical, and that's kind of where how I approach it.
Is that why you decided to stick to being more of a studio sort of person rather than
Yeah,
a live performer?
I actually I really wanted to be a live performer for a long time, and I thought I was going to do that. I was a songwriter for A&M Records, and I was trying to be the front person. And when I moved back to Minneapolis, I got a job in a studio, just escorting groups in there to keep in practice because I had moved back and I after being a songwriter, and it was easier for me to create without having to sit behind the drums. But I still play guitar and stuff like that and keyboards. But it was out of mother invention. It was out of necessity that I had to do it. Um, because there was no real recording scene when I moved back to Minneapolis at all. And we were all frustrated, and there was a lot of people in Minneapolis that were good and they were playing, and everyone was so frustrated they'd say we have to have a national hit. We have to have a record go big out of here. Everyone that's ever done anything before that had moved out. I mean, there was a bass player, Willie Weeks, played with Sly and the Family Stone. He had to move away to become famous, and Bob Dylan had to go to New York. And everyone who was anyone left Minneapolis so they could succeed. They couldn't do it from there.
So this is
Yeah.
an interesting segue for me because you got to see Prince before he got signed to Warner Brothers, and what was that experience like, and what was it that you saw in him that made you gravitate towards him as a performer, musician, etc., and made you want to work with him and collaborate?
Well, his knowledge of his taste is really what I loved is his taste in chord progressions and melodies, and he was on the money with everything, and that's hard to find. Number one, and number two, his execution was perfect. I mean, in the beginning, we'd set up a station for the guitar, station for the bass, station for the drums, and he would just move stations, and we'd overdub starting, with drums, and he did everything. But to do it objectively is I've never seen that happen before. That he could keep like segmented his mind of, into a keyboard player and a guitar player and a bass player and a drummer and a vocalist. He could take a separate look at all of them and combine them. Usually somebody can't do that themselves.
Right. And when you recorded those initial demos that were shown to Warner Brothers, were they receptive to those demos from the beginning?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did the demos, and Owen Husney brought it to Warner Brothers, and we were still just trying to shoot in the dark, saying we needed somebody. We thought he was, capable of making hit songs. So Warner Brothers was amazed right away, and not everybody was. There was several turn down letters. I have to laugh at some of them, but I mean, Columbia Records rejected Prince, and I think Owen got a letter that said the kid should stay in his basement where he belongs. He saved that because it's just out of whack. But that just goes to show you that not everybody knows everything. And especially if something new comes along, they fight it tooth and nail because it's not what they're used to.
What was it like for you to find? Would you say that was the moment that working with Prince and seeing once he did have success? Would you say that's what broke the Minneapolis sound, if you will, through?
Yeah, that broke the Minneapolis Sound. I had done a record the year before that got to be really big. It was called Funky Town, and that was a worldwide hit. So I think Prince got a little jealous of that. He wanted to have something like that, and yeah, between those things, between Funky Town and Prince's Prince wasn't a success in the very beginning. He he had luckily Warner Brothers had the policy where they'd give him 3 albums to develop, and that's what they used to do with groups, any label. But it took him 3 albums, 2 albums anyway, to start to develop his sound and hone it to his particular licks, which are very different and special. He invented a certain way of playing, uh, especially with the synthesizer horns and the Oberheims, and he had a certain style that he slowly developed, which was unbelievable. It's good.
There's always been somewhat of a mystique over the recording of Purple Rain. You recording that record, it was recorded live for the most part. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. That
Yeah.
that recording, which I remixed for a film, they have a film of that concert. It was the debut concert of the Revolution with Wendy and Lisa and Mark Brown, and I mean he had revamped his group, and they rehearsed all these new songs, and I recorded this whole concert, and nobody ever heard those songs before, most of them, and so they just stood there. I mean, it was fantastic, but nobody knew what songs they were because it was the first time they ever heard them. But Purple Rain was one of them that we recorded that wound up on the record. And yeah, it was a live recording. We added strings afterwards, and I think Prince replaced the bass part because only because it was a wireless bass, and back then wireless didn't have the same frequency response, so we had to use a one that plugged in.
What was it like? Because I'm sure back then the technology was still in its infancy to record live, and what was that like back then to have that
Well,
sort of.
well, it was really a great experience. I didn't know what it was going to be for. The recording we just recorded his concert to benefit a dance group that was they were doing choreography with the time, and Prince wanted to pay him back. So it was a benefit for the dance company, but we hired the record plant truck out of New York. It was the black truck, which it was very professional truck, and so that was the fun part. I got to record these guys on in a really great situation in a great studio truck. Uh, that's it sounded good. It was we did it on tape, so there's no substitute for that.
Do you feel like that was the moment where you finally had that breakthrough record where suddenly all the offers started pouring in for you?
Yeah, um, that particular concert that night was the beginning of Prince's career too. In a sense, it was the way it was the one that took off. It was that set, that 2 hour set, was the beginning of his career, uh, or a successful beginning of his career. So yeah, that all the elements came together, and I mean before that he was just a semi-successful regional artist. He had "I Want to Be Your Lover," but that was still on the verge of being. Not many people noticed it.
What I think is interesting is after that record, after Purple Rain, you kept coming back for various projects involving Prince, like the Family record and the Jill Jones record, and whatnot. You kept working at Paisley Park. Is that how it worked out?
Yeah, Paisley Park wasn't built then. We had a warehouse we recorded everything in, but I've been working with Prince since the demos, so at the very beginning, before he got signed, and that was just an extension of it. Um, and I was sort of the go-to guy that he called. Uh, I mean, when I could be, but I didn't. Didn't work for him. I was never on his payroll. We were just compadres, and I worked with him. I don't like to put it that way.
I think that's incredible. What do you feel? How do you feel that influence of working at Paisley Park, working with all these artists within that world, influenced you as a producer when you went on to work with artists outside of that bubble?
Well, I mean, Prince is a total professional. He's a perfectionist, and you had to be ready to go. I mean, he didn't didn't spend a lot of time getting sounds. I mean, it's like either yeah, you get it or you don't. Bam. And he, like I said, he's had these stations where we'd set up and he'd go play the guitar part, put it down, it was done. Play the bass part, put it down, it was done. You couldn't screw up. I mean, you had to be ready for him because he just, the minute he picked it up, he did it. And even if he made a mistake, he'd say, "I meant to do that." So he just kept going, and like that's the way he recorded.
Do you think that's why he was so prolific? There's always something. He was always moving on to the next thing, right?
Always moving up, always moving forward. We used to record 2 songs a day, um, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. We'd set the song up, record all the parts, do the vocals, mix it, and then put it away, and then do another song. So that's how he stacked up all this material in his vault. And a lot of times he'd do a song and I'd go, that's great. That could be your next single. And he'd say, that's what they want from me. I'm not going to give it to them. I mean, he was always overthinking and outthinking himself. And, I think he missed some things that way, but that's just the way he was.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You see, he does Purple Rain, and then he follows it up with what's to me like an about face record with Around the World in a Day, which is like
Yeah,
the antithesis of Purple Rain in a lot of ways.
yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, he never wanted to repeat himself. So things always turned left or right. Whenever you think they were going to turn left, he turned right.
Um, as a segue to that, you had a. I have to bring this up. I can't go without mentioning this. You did have a number one single with a particular band that was looking towards working with Prince at one point in the mid to late '80s, and you ended up working with them. And I'm talking about Fine Young Cannibals, and that song is "She Drives Me Crazy."
Yeah, right. Well, people were referring groups to me at that time because of Purple Rain, and the Fine Young Cannibals just in England they had a desire to work with Prince, and they knew he wouldn't. I guess he refused or something, but they got a hold of me and said, "Well, here's the next best guy," uh, and they sent me a bunch of songs from England. That one of them was called "She's My Baby," and I thought it was really cool. And I called them up and I said, "That's a great song." They said, we don't like that one so much. We're gonna throw it away." I went, "No, no." And they went, "Well, let us work on the lyrics." And they changed it to "She Drives Me Crazy," which they thought was more universal and that everybody could think that, and everybody gets driven crazy by their partners. Um, so it was a relevant thing, and Roger Ames, who was the head of London Records at the time, took me out to lunch in L.A. and he said they have a lot of trouble getting together. They all live in London, outside of London, but they can't seem to get together to finish the record. They've been working on it for a year and they can't get together to do it. Why don't we fly them to Minneapolis where they have nowhere to go except to be together, and maybe we'll finish the record that way. And sure enough, we flew them to Minneapolis, and it was like culture shock to them. I mean, they were come from the London punk scene, and they landed in Middle America, which was all Norwegian, Swedish, tall people, and they freaked out. They went, "Oh, everybody's so tall, and it's so different here." And they actually, I think Roland Gift brought his own bag of brown rice from London because he didn't think they had brown rice in Minneapolis, and
That's
they were
great.
they were under this impression that they were going to nowhere, and but it was good because they had nothing to do but work. I mean, we went out a couple places, but you know, it was great for them to get together and work like that.
Yeah, I love. I mean, to this day, I that record in particular sounds pristine as ever, and everyone always compliments you on that sound that you created with that signature snare drum
Yeah,
sound, which there's nothing like it. It doesn't sound like anything you've heard to this day. It still stands out to me, at least.
yeah. I try to do that with drums so they sound have a personality. Otherwise, drums are just drums. And my my desire is to frame a song so you know it what it is in the first two measures. You know who it is, even if it's just a drum intro. And I think I managed to do it on that song. But yeah, I gave the snare drum a certain personality, and I think that if you try to do that with certain instruments, you're making a statement. It's not just recording a group that's playing.
And speaking of that technology, how do you take music production today and how it's grown from a technological standpoint? That is,
Well, I mean, there is innovation, probably a lot more in rap music than anything else. Uh, I mean, Aaliyah had the sound of a baby crying for a chorus. And I mean, I thought that was super inventive. Um, and some people do that still. A lot of people don't. They just try to record the band like everybody else. And some people do a better job, but I don't know. I like to treat the studio as a musical instrument and sort of play the board, and I guess that's the musician coming out in me. Try to create science fiction sounds. Prince and I used to talk about this, and like if we could put guitars underwater, we would. But you know, that was a concept,
right.
just a
So,
thought.
so is that, has the technology for you, has it made it easier, or do you still use some of those same techniques that you've used for most of your career?
I still use some of the same techniques. There are plugins that you can cheat and make it easier and do things like that. And there's all sorts of drum samples and uh, you know things you can do. They've got it's easier to do now, uh, but I don't know. I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. I think you still have to reach outside the box.
Are there any artists out there today that whether from a production or songwriting standpoint or just what they bring to the table have impressed you?
Yeah, yeah, there's a couple brand new artists that I really think are fantastic, and they're even, not even known yet, really. There's a girl named Tate McRae out of Canada that I think she's on RCA. Unbelievable voice. It's like I can't even compare her to anybody. I mean, it's especially Stevie Nicks. Um, and there's another girl named Maddie Noise who is really really good and has unique properties. I mean, they're both 17, so there's a lot of good stuff coming up. Um, and there are some rap songs that are really good too. But those girls are more R&B. They're singers and they write melodies. And there's a lot of. I mean, I think there's a lot of good new people.
And who is there anybody that you've been working with lately from a production standpoint?
I've been doing a lot of blues stuff. I just finished, well, not just, but a couple months ago, finished Mike Zito's seventh album I've done with him. It's called Resurrection, and it's been like hanging in at number one on the blues charts for 5 weeks. So that's cool. I mean, I like the blues, and I always say that that's been my roots is rock blues. I've got one foot in the blues and one foot in the other part, pop music. But
So
I
you
think
feel,
everything has to have its roots, and that's always been what I've chased after.
you feel like working with an artist like that today is almost like you're coming full circle in a way?
Yeah, yeah, it is, and I mean, those are more truthful songs rather than pablum that's on the air today. But and it's real, and I'm try to go whatever's real, which is harder and harder to find.
So I'd like to ask you throughout your career you've worked with all these great artists, fantastic songs and whatnot. Do you have a proudest moment? Is there something that you think is the definitive thing for you that you've ever done?
You know, I can't say a single one that's my proudest, but there's certain songs that I think came out really good. Um, really good. I mean, just different artists. I mean, obviously, Kiss was probably a highlight because I got to use the studio as an instrument and do the unexpected. I mean, the song that Prince did was Kiss, and the record company hated it. They weren't going to put it out. They thought it was really shallow. It sounded like a demo. There was no bass. There was no echo, no reverb. And they said, nah, Prince really fucked up. We can't put this out. And I was heartbroken because I thought it was a big deal for me. I was going to get, producer, arranger credit and all that. But Prince was smart enough to say, that's the only song I'm giving you, and you better put it out, or I'm not going to give you another one. So they did, and then, bam! A year later, that's all they wanted to do. That's all they wanted to sign.
The history of that song is interesting too, because from what I've read and researched over the years, it was originally a demo that Prince had that he gave to Maserati, correct? And then
Yep.
they had put their stamp on it, and they kind of took it back, right?
Yeah, I was producing Maserati at the
Right.
time, and he gave me a. You can probably find it on the internet, but there's a one verse demo that he gave me with just playing guitar straight. Sounded like Stephen Stills demo or something, and we battled all night to try and make a groove out of it, and finally did. And then the next morning, he came back and took it back. He said, "It's too good for you guys. I'm taking it back." So, but I'm glad he did, and it came out as a major sea change. And you know, I'm still saying that people are still sort of copying that, even uh, "Up All Night to Get Stoned." That song,
Yeah.
they copy it with a gating. That's what I used on the Kiss was a noise gate that synchronized with the hi hat, and I think they did that on "Up All Night."
I think that's part of the reason why it stands out so much is because it's very minimalist. It's very subtle
Yeah,
what you did with that track.
yeah. Well, there was more on it, but then when we went to mix it, Prince goes, "We don't need this. We don't need that. We don't need this," and he kept pulling faders down. I snuck the piano up a little bit back in there, but it wound up being only 9 tracks. Uh, so it worked out.
Are you still in touch with the Prince community? As far as I know, I've read you did the remix, or you not the remix, yeah, of 1999. Am I correct?
Yeah, I did the deluxe version that came out.
Was that a big task to go through all those tracks and
No,
no?
no, it was fun. It was great. I mean, I was familiar with everything, so it was really easy to do. And I used Sunset Sound, which is what we used originally. Um, so they had all the gear there still from years ago.
I was gonna say I thought that the remix on there came out brilliantly. It wasn't brick walled or anything. I feel like a lot of these remasters come out and they sound too loud.
Yeah,
It still had the dynamics.
well, we use Bernie Grundman, who doesn't do that, and I refuse to brick wall everything. It's not my style, and it's beyond me how people can get away with that.
I never saw the point of it, but I mean, I know.
Louder.
Yeah,
That's the point of it. Louder. Everybody thinks because it's louder, it's better, which is, I think, backwards thinking.
yeah.
You know, there's a lot of tasteless things that have happened in music, but you can't prevent all of them.
It's true. David, thank you for your time. Really, it really was a real honor and a pleasure to have you on this show that is a passion project of mine. And I just want to spread the history and the word of music and all that makes it integral. I think music is so impactful to our lives. I think people take it for granted nowadays more than ever. So I'm here to spread the word and wave that flag best I can. I really appreciate you doing
That's
this.
cool. Appreciate it.
All right, Dave. Well, thank you and all the best to you. Really, thank you. And maybe we can do this again sometime down the road.
You got it.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
All right.